went to bed at night with so much anxiety thinking about that red dot. Does this girl know I've never spoken in my whole life? Like, I've never given a speech before. It was like 49% worst thing I've ever done, 51% best thing I've ever done for my career. And I ended up getting on stage and it just totally changed my life.
Meet Ashley Stahl,
counterterrorism professional turned career coach,
internationally recognized speaker,
and best-selling author.
The two things that helped my career coaching business were my first TED Talk and my second TED Talk. I made probably $200 to $400K a year as a career coach. 80% of the leads that came to me was through TEDx.
Every human probably benefits from the reflective exercise of figuring out what's my talk.
What people don't know about TEDx is if you...
My audience is going to be upset if I don't ask you about being a counterterrorism professional. So can you walk us back to that?
I sometimes wonder how I became a national security person.
Welcome everyone to Unlock Your Potential. This is your host, Jeff Lerner. Always excited to be back with you, having amazing conversations with amazing human beings. Today, we are joined by Ashley Stahl, career coach, keynote speaker, blogger, TEDx speaker, and former counterterrorism professional. Bet you didn't see that coming. Author of a best-selling book, U-Turn. Love the name U-Y-O-U, Turn. Get unstuck, discover your direction, design your dream career. She also runs a business that helps other people get TEDx talks. Lots more I could say, but I'd rather hear from her. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really grateful you're here. I guess candid disclosure to the audience that we were supposed to start 10 minutes ago, and instead I got 10 minutes of free consulting on how to get my TEDx talk. So coming soon to a stage near you, Jeff Lerner. But no, in all seriousness, Ashley, really, really glad you're on the show. And I have like so much I want to talk about that is all the things you do now, but like my audience is going to be upset if I don't ask you about being a counterterrorism professional. So can you walk us back to that real quick?
Yeah. I sometimes wonder how I became a national security person, like such a random thing for such a sensitive soul. Nobody would have seen it coming looking back, because when I was like 7 years old, I used to sit on a hammock and read Shel Silverstein poetry. So I ended up in national security. I think the short of it is the creative part of my brain that's always loved words and writing has also loved language. And that was my entry point into national security. Was at a young age, I noticed that I was really good. I learned Spanish pretty quickly. And then from there in middle school, I learned French pretty quickly. And then when I finished college, I started taking Arabic at UCLA. That was when I got humbled and realized, no, I'm not as good at languages as I thought. It was way harder to learn Arabic. And I don't know, like most people who are 18 years old, you don't really know what you want to do. And you're thrust into a college setting where you're spending all this money to somehow create something you want to do with your career. It's such a bizarre thing to think about because our brains aren't really formed until we're 26, according to research. And yet here we are making life decisions. And it's like, how are we supposed to know what career path we want, what topic to major in, if we've never even had a career or tried anything on? And so I just remember thinking, well, I'm good at languages. I'm good at people. 9/11 happened. It really affected me. And I guess I'll just pursue the highest level of protection and help that I could offer as someone who's great with words. And national security is what came to mind because of my language skills. So I ended up going to graduate school in London. I went to King's College Department of War Studies. It's really well known for national security studies. And then I made my way over to the Pentagon, and it was during the Obama administration. I make it sound like it was an easy little hop over, but I worked my butt off getting a job offer to be a defense contractor. And I was assigned to an $80 million contract vehicle that was related to Afghanistan. And I spent about 2 years on that. And then I ended up getting cherry-picked by the private sector to manage a Fortune 100 company's intelligence team because they had tens of thousands of employees all over the world, and they needed somebody to input their team with intelligence to make sure that their team wasn't in harm's way when they have assets everywhere. And then eventually I just thought, wow, I'm really good at networking and job hunting. And I had a career coaching platform for 12 years after that. And the two things that helped my career coaching business were my first TED Talk and my second TED Talk. Those were the two things that I got that totally changed my career. The first one I met a woman at an awards ceremony in Washington, D.C., and she had just spoken at TEDx UN. And she told me, oh, yeah, I just spoke there. And I told her, like, that sounds like a bucket list thing for me, like maybe one day. And I was like 23 at the time. It was like, I don't know, I'm 38 now almost. And I was, it was 2011 at that time. So I don't even know math well enough. Thankfully, Wise Whisper Agency is a speechwriting company, not a math company. But all of it said, she was like, oh, I'm sure you'll get one someday. And she looked at me and she smiled, like almost like a little cartoon that you see, like the like on her tooth, like. And I ended up going to Istanbul the next week. I had a work assignment, and it was when the protests were happening in Taksim Square. I don't know if people listening follow the news. I don't judge you if you don't. But there were these crazy protests, and there was this tear gas in the air. There was tear gas in my eyes. And it was actually the first time I meditated. I sat down in a Spice Bazaar just to get protection from the protest. And it wasn't like I was at risk, like somebody was coming to attack me. It was just like civil unrest, and I just removed myself. And I had this tear gas in my eye, and I felt a buzz on my phone, and it was this girl. And I just met her like 3 days prior. I went straight to Istanbul after the award ceremony in DC. And she said, hey, I recommended you to a curator, and I got you a TEDx talk at Berkeley. And I just remember thinking, like, does this girl know I've never spoken in my whole life? Like, I've never given a speech before. So then they email me and they ask me for a speaking reel. And I'm like, using my iPhone 2 or whatever iPhone it was in 2012, like, what is a speaking reel? And sure enough, I don't have one. And so I propped the iPhone I have up against the motel bathroom mirror, and I pulled the shower curtain behind me, and I don't even know what I said. I like blacked out, but I gave like a speech or something off the cuff, which was not my skill set. Granted, I've always been good at words, but that was a whole nother level. And somehow, by some way of miracle, they still kept me as a speaker. And I ended up going on stage after Guy Kawasaki, which is such a nightmare for somebody who's never spoken in their life. And before that, when you get booked for a TEDx talk, you have about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 or 6 months of runway, right? Like they book their speakers and then they go plan their events. So in those months leading up to it, I found a speechwriter in the administration. And I told him, can you please just give me some tips? I'm about to embarrass myself and flail on this red dot on YouTube. So he walked me through like the opening of a talk, and here's how he writes for the president, and how many tips should I give in the talk, and how do I close the talk? It was probably like a 20-minute conversation, but I listened to that guy like my life depended on it. And I went to bed at night with so much anxiety thinking about that red dot. It was like 49% worst thing I've ever done, 51% best thing I've ever done for my career. And I ended up getting on stage, and as much as anyone could ace something that is something they've never done before, I did the best I could have. To this day, I still get a little embarrassed, a little cringy about it being up there, because nobody wants their first try public speaking to go out there this hardcore, but it did. And I promised myself, I'm going to give another talk when I'm good at this. I'm going to give another talk when I think I know what I'm doing. I'm going to redeem myself with myself. And 7 years later, after having an online career coaching platform and having, I will say, 80% of my career coaching leads, I made probably 200 to 400K a year as a career coach, just in a private practice. 80% of the leads that came to me for that business was through TEDx. So I don't know, mathematically, at least $1 million of revenue over 5 or 6 years was directly tied to just people finding me there. And so I did the second talk and I poured myself into it. I gave it in 2019. It opens up with my dad getting a phone call that I was kidnapped. That's how my second TEDx opens. And it's a talk about how to figure out what you really want in life. And that talk, I knew it was going to go viral, not because of my own ego. It was like one of those special business moments you get where you just get this very strong knowing with something you're doing that you're going to be met by the universe. I feel like, we all think we're onto something all the time as entrepreneurs, but if you really look back at your past 20 years or however long you've been at it, you're like, no, there were like 2 or 3 things that I knew would hit, And this was one of them for me. I just knew. And then it went on the internet and it died. Nobody watched it for like 9 months. And I even spoke in what they teach in manifestation, which I'm open to that stuff, but I don't talk about it, think about it, live by it very often, right? I just know it's a thing. I know what people are doing with it, but I spoke as if I'm a manifestation expert. I was like talking to friends like, that's so weird. I'm like waiting for this to go viral. How is this not happening? And then it did. And now it's in the top 100 talks of all time, ranked. And it's brought me an international licensing deal on my online courses in Asia. Like there's brands like Masterclass out here that in Asia, they have their equivalent, reached out to me. What people don't know about TEDx is if you go viral on TEDx, you get picked up often by the TED channel. Each one has 40 million subscribers. So algorithmically, it's the gift that keeps giving. You get one hit with TEDx, you get a second hit with TED, and then TED has a network of volunteer translators. That's the third hit. Now you're also even more international. So I got 6 book deals offered. I attracted a speaking agent. I went on a speaking tour. My keynote fee went from $5K to $30K. From all of those speeches I got through the TED Talk and or TEDx Talk. And it just totally changed my life. So since then, I've had Wise Whisper Agency, and we write and we book TEDx Talks for people. And I was scared to start this agency because I didn't want to have an agency that was hinging on something like booking, which is like PR. You're beholden to somebody saying yes to you, right? Like we could do all the work. But in order to mitigate that fear, I referred 40 career coaching clients to a booker for TEDx, and she booked 39 out of 40 over 2 years. That was when I got the confidence to start Wise Whisper Agency. And thus far, we have 100% success getting our clients booked on the TEDx stage. And so that's what's brought me here. So short answer, you asked me about counterterrorism. TEDx was a part of my journey then. It's a part of my journey now. But I think the biggest thing I learned, especially through the career coaching lens, is when you follow what feels right for you, even if what you're doing right now isn't the thing you're supposed to be doing in your life forever, the opportunities for you to become who you're supposed to be will often come up on the periphery. And so even on my way into national security, I was a really good job seeker. People started to ask me for tips all the time. They would say, you should be a career coach. And that was before coaching was like a thing, like 2011, And I'd be like, what's a career coach? Like a hockey coach? They like cheering outside your office? Like, what does that even mean? And so becoming a career coach got me into the game of content. It got me into understanding digital marketing. It got me into understanding what a TEDx could do, which got me into being a speaker. So for anybody listening, I eventually wrote a book about all this called U-Turn. And the message of the book is this: don't do what you love. Don't follow your passion. Do what you are. And when I look back at me in national security, I am way too sensitive of a person to be advising people on how they should be using their guns and deploying to Afghanistan. That's not the right niche for me. So I was following something I thought was interesting, something maybe I loved, but it wasn't who I am. And I think that's the biggest thing is there's a whole body of research to prove that when you do something aligned with your skill set, you perform better, and chances are you're going to have a better time. And so that's what I can truly commit to as I help anybody along my journey.
So thank you very much, everyone. That has been Ashley Stahl. We're going to conclude because I'm totally kidding. We're not wrapping up, but like, damn, you just nailed it. I'm so excited to dig deeper on what you just said, which is don't do what you love, do who you are. As you were talking earlier about how you just kind of knew there was a moment with that second TED Talk, you just knew that it was gonna hit. I've been going through a moment. This is about you, not me, but I'll just share. I'm going through a thing right now where I'm going through this really like gruelingly hard transformation that's been carrying on about 1.5 years and probably has through the end of this year to kind of come out the other side of it. But underneath it, I just know that this is moving closer to the bullseye of what I'm on this earth to do. And I know it's going to work. I have this like almost like supernatural level of confidence about it that's frankly carried me for 1.5 years up through what otherwise would feel pretty thankless. So partly for myself and partly for the audience, can you talk to me more about the various facets of what you mean when you say you just knew? Like really, like, give me a whole chapter on what that meant for you to just know why you knew, how you knew, what are the different dimensions along which you knew. Let's start there, please.
Yeah, you mean how I just knew I was in the wrong path?
No, when you said you did that talk and you knew it was going to go viral.
Yeah.
Like, what are the signals, the sort of like exhibits A, B, C, and D of making a choice in our life that is so aligned we just know?
Yeah. I think the most important thing to realize is, especially with going viral, it's not easy to go viral, but it is simple. You simply write the best thing you've ever written. And if you're not a good writer, you get a better writer. So when I look at my speech writing team, we've got 15 of us. Nobody on the team hasn't sold a New York Times bestselling book, written a New York Times bestselling book, or sold a movie, or written a TV show that I know about. Our writers have written on shows like Lizzie McGuire, The New Girl. They've written New York Times bestseller like Conversations with God. Like, there have been people who have been parts of projects that are much... I'm a very good writer, and I do believe that some of the people on the team are an even stronger writer than I am. And so I think that's been something that is incredibly powerful to pay attention to, is the words that you put out there matter. And there's a lot I can say here about how to write a speech that can really move people. But I was doing all of the things that I knew needed to be there in order for something to really be met by the universe as a writer, as a content creator, as a digital marketer. So that's the first piece. I think the second piece is delivery, right? So you can write the best thing ever, but if your delivery sucks, you're not getting anywhere, right? So why do people pay? I was living in New York for a while, and people pay for, a lot of money for Hamilton tickets or whatever have you. Mm-hmm. I was thinking to myself, why do people pay so much money for Hamilton tickets on Thursday? It's the same price as Friday sometimes. Thursday's less desirable. It's because what you get on Friday is the same as what you get on Thursday. The performance, the quality is consistent. None of the actors at Hamilton are saying, we're going to channel tonight and see how it goes. Hopefully I remember my lines. They all deliver with precision. And that's why it's important for people to know that if you want to be a top paid speaker, if you want to be a high impact speaker, you cannot be channeling, flowing, and hoping for your words to come through. You are more of an actor than you are a speaker when you're a top paid speaker. So 50% was me knowing that not only did I write something in accordance with some digital marketing rules that I can share, but I also wrote something that was moving, that as a writer, I was moved by, that people pay attention to. And a tip for anyone that's thinking about writing a keynote or a speech of any sort is that you want to tune into your life and think about when people have locked in with you and you've shared stories with them. Which stories have you shared that you've gotten the most attention from people? So I'll leave you there. I mean, I could get into it further, but there's a lot about how to choose a story, how to open up a talk with your story. There's a lot of tactical, practical that's involved too.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I like it. So you, what is it? You create your own certainty, so to speak.
Yeah.
Basically through preparation and diligence and all the stuff that maybe sometimes people want to sidestep.
Yeah.
Okay. So words, language. You hooked me right out of the gate when you were talking about your aptitude with language. It's never lost on me, and this isn't to get spiritual or religious or anything, but like the fundamental Judeo-Christian creation narrative is about the spoken word. Mm-hmm. In the beginning was the word, right? Like, and so I would say I border on the obsessive about language and about words. And I truly believe that basically anything is the beginning of anything that is possible becoming possible is finding the right language to package it, or to if that makes sense. That words are so powerful. So I find that I have a natural, I think, both aptitude and interest in language and words. You obviously do too. Not everybody does. So when you work with people that want, let's say they want the outcome of a successful talk, but maybe they aren't as naturally passionate about the process and the language, how do you, and I'm asking out of sincere self-interest because I so often am working with people where I think if they cared more about the language, they would get far better results. But they're being flippant about the language. They're not holding language itself as something of great reverence, like in almost like a spiritual way. How do I get people to care more about language? It's not everybody's thing. So maybe that's my question is when you get people in who are more flippant about language and you're sitting there going, no, the language is everything. Maybe you can help me. How do we get people to care more about language in their life in general?
Yeah, I think that, how you talk to people matters. And I think more importantly, if we look at the research, John Levy, behavioral scientist, he was on my podcast. One of the things that really stuck out to me that he shared was that the most memorable human experience, if I asked you, what do you think is the most memorable emotion? A lot of people are going to say love or friendship or purpose or something, but the most memorable human emotion is awe. So if you can create a sense of captivation for people, you have an ability to be instilled in their memory in a way that they will take action because of you, because they can remember what you said. And it is so hard to retain all of the information that's floating around in these times right now. We are living in an era. I was actually writing this for a client's TEDx talk that we're working on right now because we write and we book the talk, but she was talking about cognitive overload. And I'm going to mess up the statistics, so I won't attempt to fully state it. But there was something around in the past 20 years, we've been exposed to more information than the past 200,000 years or something like that. So I do think that being able to create a sense of awe is your way of cutting through so much information. And I don't know, I think sometimes information creates constipation. People just listen to info and it's more info in their head and it blocks them up and it doesn't really help them. So my job when I was writing my TEDx talk was, how do I move people in a way that captivates them? And then if I can captivate them, now I have a first, a pass into their psyche, a pass into being able to actually change their life in some way. And I say that without a God complex, right? Because I think a lot of people are like, I want to change people's life, so I mean something. But I was like, I think that's the place that I was in when I was writing the talk was, and this lends itself to writing and words in general. If you're going to write something, and I know you and I kind of touched on this before you hit record, you want to ask yourself, what is my most original thinking that I have to say on a topic that I'm an expert in, right? So let's say somebody listening wants to give a TEDx talk and they are a leadership consultant and they want more leadership clients. Okay, what's your most original thinking about leadership? What do you want to happen because of this TEDx talk? Clients will tell me, oh, I want more clients. I want more consulting gigs. Great. Who are the people that would hire you for consulting that's watching this talk that you need to get their attention? Well, they're usually burnt out, and that's actually something I help a lot of people with when I'm coaching them. Great. What's your most original thinking on burnout? Let's land right there. Let's put our teeth into that. And I think there's many different ways we can get through to people, right? It's original thinking. And what I mean by that is it's not, you can tell people a trite tip in a speech. You can tell people to get outside their comfort zone. That's your tip. That's fine. But what you have responsibility to do if you want your talk to really impact people is you need to follow that statement with your own 2 cents on the matter. Too many people are repeating what other people have said. These ideas are not new, but how they're shared is new and it is unique. When I used to have e-courses, I still have them hiding somewhere on my old websites, but on career coaching, and I would talk about salary negotiation. And I'm sure everybody has had similar things to say about salary negotiation if you're an expert on negotiation. But what I would talk about is how when you're negotiating your salary, say it like you're ordering a Subway sandwich. Talk about it like, do you want pickles? Do you want onions? Neutral tone. So it's like my way of delivering that, talking about the Subway sandwich, that's my own original thinking on how to get people in the vibe that I want to get them in to negotiate. So it's not about staying away from what everybody's saying, if that's what you truly believe in your heart, but it's about adding texture and color to it that is your own way of really looking at it.
So two things I want to ask you related to this. One is I love what you said about awe, producing awe. And I'll actually share I run a platform called Entra, which is our category is what we call life design, which is basically the fusion of personal development and entrepreneurship, which I think are two complementary pieces of a larger whole than either by themselves. But prior to branding it as Entra, when I first started just putting content out that in what grew into Entra, I called it School of Awesome. So it's just like this brand. I went and bought the domain schoolofawesome.com, still own it. And I was very intentional about it. I mentioned I'm, sort of OCD about language, where it's like, it was literally like a way of thinking, sort of a philosophy around how to produce awe, how to create a life that would imbue you with a sense of awe. You were so awestruck, like awesome, like get some awe in your life almost. Like you would be so awestruck by your own life. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I created this. Like that's so I want. We're always looking for something else to be in awe of. Maybe it's Michael Jordan. Maybe it's Beyonce. What about actually holding ourselves in such regard? So this concept of awe, I've always I've been struck with, so to speak. So I wonder if you could say more about it. I said I had two questions. I'll stop with just this one. Like, do you have any sort of a formula or prescription around what are the raw ingredients of awe such that we can actually predictably produce that in our life as a response from others?
I don't have an official description or definition for it, but I do have my own gauge for when I read something and I feel a sense of awe as somebody has a agency that's written a book, more than 100 talks, that the goal for TEDx is to give awe, right?
Okay.
I will say I can feel when some of them are going to go viral. And what I'm feeling when I read them is a range of emotion on the outset. So when I think about what makes something go viral, obviously titles are like a white elephant party. If all you have to work off of is the packaging, you're just going to pick the best package, right? Like you go to a white elephant party, if there's like a gift with snot and like weird stuff on it, you're not going to touch it. You're going to get the prettiest, gift. That's what a title is. People are too coy and cute with their titles. You need to be straightforward. If you look at the top 100 performing talks, the titles are the art of, the way to, the skill of, the reason why. They're very straightforward. They're SEO backed. They're exactly what your ideal customer is Googling at 3 a.m. when they're stressed about whatever the problem is that you can solve. When it comes to awe in the talk, that's where the next step is. So the title, I don't think, is a place for awe, but the opening of the talk, I think, is the most important place for awe. And when I think about an opening, I think there's two ways to approach it. The first way is talking about something, like referencing some sort of story. The other way to tell a story is bringing people into the story. So what I mean by it's like thinking about if you watch a movie. If you're watching a movie, there's movies where the narrators talk about something happening and you see a bunch of B-roll of people, things, and whatever, versus a spy movie where you're pulled right into the scene where they're in a gun like shootout or something like that. An opening of a good talk that's going to create awe, you're going to bring them right into the shootout, right? So what that means, there's a few different ways to write an opener when you look at it from this perspective. The first way is just straight up storytelling. If you storytell, there's two types of stories you could do that with. The first thing is a cheap shot. A cheap shot is like the craziest story of your life, right? Like we have a stem cell researcher who walked away from 2 fatal car accidents alive. Everybody else didn't survive. That's a crazy story. It's a very sad story. It's a cheap shot. We could write that as the opener. People are going to feel all sorts of things because it's a wild story. The second type of storytelling is more about relatability. So, for example, we had a client who was an energy healer. She filled out our intake form, which a lot of clients have told us our intake form has given them a lot of stories that they didn't even know they had. Like they pulled stories out of their life that they now use on the speaking circuit all the time. One of our clients, she filled out the intake form. She talked about in high school how she felt like this nerdy kid and she felt kind of pudgy and she was really hard on herself. She went to the popular kid's birthday party and one of the girls said that he was interested in talking to her. She went to the bathroom to get herself together. And by the time she came out of the bathroom, She overheard him saying, ew, not her. I don't want to talk to her. And it was a story of shame, right? Like a very relatable story of like not feeling good enough or not feeling like you're pretty enough or whatever it is. And so that is not a cheap shot story, right? Like that's not the craziest story anybody's ever heard, but it is a deeply personal story that people can relate to. So those are two approaches to storytelling. There's a third approach to TEDx talks specifically that I see quite often that is not about the cheap shot and the crazy story. It's not about the relatable story. It's conversational. It's the shocking statistic, and then the person backs into it and starts to talk about it. We rarely go that route because the shocking statistic does grab people's attention, but then you need to keep their attention after that, and the conversation about it. The statistic needs to be so shocking and threatening to them that they're willing to listen to all your information for their own knowledge in an urgent way. Otherwise, they're going to get bored and you're going to lose them after the shocking statistic. The conversation in the opener loses them. So I think storytelling is like a net that carries people and holds people throughout the opening. And I think it's a place that you can show awe, and you just need to show a range of human emotion. And in the same, so whether you do a cheap shot story or a relatable story, you need to remember what I was talking about movies. Either there's the narrator talking about what's happening and opening up your TEDx talk with some sort of reflection, or there's bringing them into the shooting scene in a spy movie. You need to bring people right into your moments when you're writing the opener of a talk. And that's what we do at Wise Whisper Agency. And those are the talks that I think have the most possibility for awe. So instead of talking about how you lost your dad when you were 10 years old, bring them into the moment you got the phone call that your dad passed away.
Okay. And yeah, I was sort of instinctively almost assuming that your answer was going to involve the idea of story and narrative. And I feel like maybe that's kind of was my takeaway, was that an enforcement of that idea that like what produces awe in people, and that, you know, I'm thinking of the Maya Angelou quote that people forget they'll actually forget what you said, and they'll even forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So the KPI, if you will, of your words or of your deeds, the KPI of your sayings and doings is actually the feelings that they produced in terms of memorability and impact. And so to craft language with the intent to produce awe rather than the intent to convey information or data, which will all subsequently be forgotten, the only thing that would be remembered would be the feeling anyways, is sort of a meta abstraction from what you just said that I'm gonna try to keep with me, because I have a lot more thoughts on that. Okay, but I want to talk more about the other thing that I was going to ask you about, which was if you could expand on something else you said earlier about not doing what you love, but doing what you are.
Yeah.
I feel like that statement could be confused if somebody tried to, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Help me be more clear on that.
Yeah, I think that people love a lot of things, right? Like I really love cupcakes. Take me to any new city and I'm going to go find the best cupcake in town. I'm going to go to Yelp. I'm going to find the reviews. I love massages, but I'm not meant to bake cupcakes and I'm not meant to be a masseuse. And I do think a lot of people think like that. There's a big difference between being a happy consumer of something and a meant to be producer of something. I consume politics happily, but I'm not meant to be a politician. It's not within my purview. It's not within my skill set. I think too many people, if you look at the millennial generation, there's this thing called the Google Ngram. And it's a really interesting tool on Google. I don't know if it still exists. It's been a while since I've checked on it, but you can type a phrase in it and it shows you when that phrase started to appear on Google and the increase in use of that phrase. So if you look at follow your passion as a phrase, it started to pick up a bit in the late 80s and it peaked a lot after the millennium. And so the millennial generation, I think, largely grew up hearing follow your passion, follow your bliss, all these 3-worded directives that I think really leave most of us more lost than we began. And so what I mean by this is, Stephen Pressfield, great author, he talks about this concept of shadow careers. He talks about how there's so many people who choose careers that are tantalizingly similar to the career that they want, but it's not that. You think about the production assistant that's not being an actor. That's what they really want to do, right? the sound, guy who actually wants to be a musician, whatever have you. So I think that a lot of people choose shadow careers out of what they love doing. Like, oh, I love music, so I'm going to do anything in the range of the music space. But every industry is like a pie. It has many slices, right? When I graduated from King's College in London, a lot of people are like, I just want to work for the government. I'm like, that's a pretty freaking big place. The government is a big pie with a lot of slices. What in the government do you want to do? Where in the government do you want to be? I think that is the thinking that gets you further. And that has to do with thinking less about what you love and more about what you are. Because the truth of the matter, if I want to work in the government, there's many different skill sets that exist in there. And no matter what job you have, any job, you're pretty much leading with one skill set mostly throughout the day. So when I looked at me at the Pentagon, I was actually leading with the coordination skill set. And I talk about that in chapter 2 of my book, that there's probably 10 core skill sets that I think exist largely in the workforce. I wrote the book in like 2018, 19. I genuinely think there's probably 12 core skill sets now and not 10, because the more I get to know people, the more research I do. But by that point, I'd had about 10 that I'd fleshed out. 2 of them I would break apart. But coordination was the skill set I was using when I was at the Pentagon. The skill set I'm using now at Wise Whisper Agency with these TEDx talks is writing. It's words, right? Words is my core skill set. And the thing you need to consider when you tune into your core skill set is your energy levels. Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? If you're an introvert and your words is your core skill set, you're going to be behind your laptop writing or with your journal writing, and that's going to make you money in some way, right? If you're an extrovert, it's going to look different how you use your words. Maybe you're a speaker, right? So I think it's first looking at what is your core skill set, and then looking at how does your energy work? Does it go inward? Does it go outward? How are you going to use that skill set? So yeah, hopefully that answers some of your questions about this distinction of doing what you love versus doing what you are. If you look at the government pie, like there's a lot of communications jobs in governments. There's a lot of being a spy, like being out in the field, like very different skill sets. So in a sense, the government is the backdrop and your skill set is the foreground. And that's the case, I think, for just about any industry.
Hey there, it's Jeff. So real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. I use text messages to provide unique value to the Unlock Your Potential community. These texts could just be random thoughts. It could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning, maybe giving an update on a special I'm running or some free training that I host for my community. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that is 702-996-3926. Let's get back to the podcast.
I think that it's interesting in a number of different ways. I feel like you just touched on sort of an underlying theme that I think is very real and present, and that it's very necessary to call it out so that it doesn't undermine us, which is the understandable human desire, and especially of late, I would say the prevalence of that desire to make things feel better, like to be easier and lighter and happier and more fun and less intense and scary in a way. And what I mean by that is this idea of doing what you love, like the long form doing of anything is going to involve a very broad range of experiences. We're going to feel lots of different ways in the doing of a thing. We're going to have lots of different types of experiences or dimensions of engagement within the context of the doing of any one thing. And so if we associate a particular emotion with the thing, especially as a reasoning for doing the thing, in this case, the emotion of love, or the experience of fun or joy or whatever, we pretty much guarantee that we're going to be disappointed. Because the reality, when we get into the long form doing of a thing, we're going to experience a lot of different emotions, and most of them aren't going to be love. And most of them aren't going to be fun. And most of them aren't going to feel light. And so if it's like, oh, but I love this thing, so I want to do it all the time, well, get ready to fall out of love with it. If you're actually taking on doing it all the time, especially under the pressures of a career or a business. And I know I'm saying that from experience of having been a professional musician for a long time, until the point where physically and psychologically I was actually in pain because of music and had to completely divorce myself from it for almost a decade to re-find that joy. And now I play every day precisely because it's not my job. So that's the first thing that came to mind. And then you said, follow your passion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh yeah, I'll bet there is a lot of Googling for that, but I'll bet there's not as much Googling for what the word passion actually means from the Latin word passio for suffering. Oh yeah, if you follow your suffering, you're actually probably more on track for what you're called to do than thinking of it as something that's going to feel good. Because I think that your calling is actually that which you are most willing to suffer for over the longest period of time, because there's something compelling you that it matters no matter how it feels. And that's kind of like our life.
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, actually, that's something we do a lot in TEDx speeches is etymology. Like, I love that you looked at passion and the Latin root and suffering. I think there's a lot of wisdom to language in that way. And that's another great thing to do in an opener that captivates and creates awe, is if you can educate people and help them see things that are common to them, like the word passion, in a different way. That's just contrarian thinking through facts, right? This is the Latin root, and there's this fact here that actually undoes the way that you might be seeing it. That creates awe because you're showing contrarian thinking. So, I mean, there's so much to be said about what you're asking me, but I love your perspective, and I think these tools are really good for people to bring with them as they do create those senses of awe for people.
So let's use the TEDx stage as a metaphor more than necessarily an objective here. Not everybody listening perhaps sees themselves or is presently desiring to be on a TEDx stage. But I think we can use it as a metaphor to say like every human probably benefits from the reflective exercise of figuring out what's my talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is it that I have suffered enough for? What is it that I have dug deeply enough into in my life? And what is it enough that's idiosyncratic and unique enough to me and my experience that's not just a regurgitation of some, Gary V talking point? Like, what is that thing? I'll give you another etymology, the word purpose.
Yeah.
Coming from the old French proposer, which is to propose something, that which I propose or that which I offer up to the world. And so my sort of working hypothesis of life is that there's these things that we're supposed to go so deep into that they suffuse our very being. And that we're supposed to bring those things up to the surface and stand for them in the sense of a proposal, i.e. a purpose. And that over time, as we continue trying to live that way and find those things and dig deeper into those things that we find ourselves drawn into, usually signaled as much or more by pain as by pleasure, then those become the things that at the end of our life are our insurance policy against regret, in the sense that we didn't live our purpose, so to speak, right? And so I'm curious, maybe for the person who doesn't have some professional reason to be seeking a TED Talk or TEDx talk, where would you, which is in a sense a liberated place to be, because it means there's no objective orientation. You're completely free to do it, to make it whatever you want. How do you counsel people to maybe start the process of figuring out what the hell it is they actually have to say in this world?
I think a lot of people overthink TEDx, and they think about it like, and that's the thing I was trying to get at with you. And that's also why I'm really proudly not affiliated with TED or TEDx. I actually am kind of irritated by like some of the ways the brand shows up, and I sound like this irritable person saying that. Hopefully I'm not, but I guess I just feel like they don't really seem to like entrepreneurs going up on stage and promoting themselves in any way. They don't want their brand to be associated with that. My response to that is, do you really expect incredibly talented people to pour their soul into giving the best talk of their life with no benefit to themselves whatsoever? And so I guess, they do have your bio you're allowed to put beneath the talk. But when it comes to people and TEDx, I would say the TEDx channel and the TEDx brand, they have a lot of guidelines about self-promotion, about the kind of science you can share, which we're very aware of with my team. But there's a lot of reasons your TEDx can get pulled down if you overstep on those guidelines. But I think a lot of people buy into their ethos that you need to have this one idea worth spreading. But like I was saying to you, before, it's like, this is not really a TEDx talk. It's a YouTube talk. YouTube owns the house. TEDx is the bouncer at the door. So instead of asking yourself, what is my one idea worth spreading? Ask yourself, where's my most original thinking? And then by the time I'm done writing this, what's a really good idea that's coming out of it? If you don't know what's one idea worth spreading coming out, ask ChatGPT and then brainstorm with your friends.
So you said, where's my most original thinking? Do you think it would be a truism to say that at least it's likely that your most original thinking is located inside your most abundant thinking, meaning that which you have thought about the most, or that which you have thought most about, is probably that which you have thought most creatively or uniquely about.
I don't know.
Maybe a litmus test would be like, find the thing that you have thought most about, and that might at least be a clue of the direction of your purpose or your proposal.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My company's called Wise Whisper Agency because I was leaving the state of California. I moved to New York, and when I refiled it, I needed a new business name. And I didn't know what to call it, and I just called it, I didn't even have my agency, but I called it Wise Whisper because of intuition. Like, I feel like intuition is a wise whisper. And I didn't really think I was creating an agency. And then by the time I created this, I'm like, well, this is my business entity name, and I don't want to do a whole legal thing. So now we're called Wise Whisper Agency. But the point of me bringing that up is that you're talking about what you think about for a long time. And I do think there's value in how much time people think about things. I think there's equal value in wisdom that just comes in. I've met so many people that are tortured by a decision they need to make, and it feels like this never-ending spiral of being able to make the decision. And then one day they get a wise whisper and it's clear. They know what they need to do. And it's not something they thought about really for a long time. The answer or some sort of piece of information came through to them. So I think it's partially a game of like, what have you spent a lot of time, thinking about? But I also think it's more about like what feels deeply true to you and really special to you and really important to you. And I think that not everybody has something to say. I will say when you have a team of killer writers like what we have, we can make a story out of just about anything. But we try to use our powers for good and not for evil, and to make stories for people that really want to carry them out there.
And it's not a binary answer, but maybe it's a gradient. Where do you stand, like empirically? I mean, something you'd really commit to in terms of what you just said, that not everyone really has something to say. And I mean, look, everybody has words to utter, but like something that freaking matters.
Yeah.
And I have maybe a naively optimistic viewpoint that short of a major cognitive debilitation, I mean, there's, people that have sad circumstances, but short of that, every human on earth, like if you've suffered, you've learned.
Right.
If you've learned, you have something to share. And so I'm curious how true or how encouraging would you be to the person that's like, I don't think I have something to say, based on a belief that, no, yes, you do. Trust me, you just haven't found it yet.
That's genuinely what we found with most people. Most people that come in, I feel like our clients are divided in half. Half of them come in and they feel like a racehorse and they want to run, and meaning like they feel like they have something to say, but they don't know what it is. And they're just like, help me get out of the stable. And our creative director was a right hand. She made a lot of decks for Steve Jobs. She was at Apple for a long time, and she wrote all of his executive team's speeches. So she helps she runs creative direction, and we have creative directors, and she oversees the quality of the talks and the quality of our work. We both talk about this all the time, and we really do feel like a lot of people do not realize how much they have to say. I think a lot of it is that they haven't made sense of their life story. They haven't taken the time to really look at their life and draw those ties together. And that's another piece of feedback we get quite often when working with us. And it's interesting because we write the whole talk over 4 Zoom calls. That's it. It's a done for you offer. So it's 90 minutes, 4 Zoom calls. People show up. We pull the magic out of them. The creative director delegates to the speechwriter. The speechwriter can spend up to 80 hours writing. So in 4 meetings, we're pulling information out of people, and we're helping them make sense of information from their intake form that they've never made sense out of. And so I think if you don't feel like you have a story, you just haven't made sense of your story most of the time.
I'm so glad you said that. I love it. I'll share with you another little etymological tidbit.
Yeah, please.
people long for fulfillment, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's actually the meta. The wanting of all wanting is just to feel fulfilled, because then I don't want anything else because I'm full. It's like you tell the waiter, no, I'm good, I'm full, right? Like that's actually what we want, is to get to where we don't want. So people long for fulfillment, and they seek it, and they try to define it, and they try to create it, and they try to conjure it as if it was ever theirs. The word comes from the Old English word fulfillon, prophecy or destiny. It was never up to us. The story was already written. We are the protagonist. Our calling in life is to find the story that we're already living and get clear on it so that we can then start to live it more proudly and more intentionally. And that's what the word fulfillment means. That's where the feeling comes from. It was never ours to create in our life. It was ours to align with from whatever created us. And so I offer that up because so much of our work that I do in my world is really helping people find that, and then find in a hyper practical way the ability to operationalize it and actually make a practical life out of it, because that's all well and good, but we still have bills to pay, right? So
Right. Exactly.
Okay, Ashley, I'm like, I feel like we're just getting warmed up.
I could talk
remiss.
for a long time about this, but you ask great questions, and I really appreciate you sharing these thoughts with anybody who needs them.
Well, I really appreciate it. Please let the world know whether they want a TED Talk or they just want to be inspired by someone that's great at TED Talks. How can the world go find more Ashley Stahl?
Yeah, we're at wisewhisperagency.com. We're working right now to create a TEDx Power Pack of just tips for you to go write your own TEDx talk with or without us. So you can find that at wisewhisperagency.com/powerpack.
Very, very cool. We'll put those links in the show notes. Ashley, I have so enjoyed this time, and you're probably already braced for this. After we turn the recording off, I'm going to pepper you with questions about TED Talks. But
Of course.
This has really been fantastic. Thank you. On behalf of the audience, really, thanks for your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, to all you viewers and listeners out there, you know what I'm going to say, because you are the best part of this show. Even when Ashley's a guest, you're why we do it. And we're so glad we got this time together. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
When I started, I found that other content creators were very stingy. They did not want to share their secrets. They did not tell you the real truth of what they did. I decided to give everything I knew away for free in little videos every single week, because if we don't tell people what works and they go try it, they'll never trust us.